I'm going to record so you guys have this too. Um, it's an unusual place
Uh-huh.
for me, but I mean, I've grown up on the West Coast.
Right. It's funny because I mean, obviously, like, were you were there during the winter? It looks like you had your coat on, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Number one, it's super cold. It's
so
got
cold.
Well, yeah, it's because it's on the Great Lakes. So it's
Exactly.
on you get the lake effect. And then obviously where I'm at is like Lake Erie is literally like 20 minutes from where I'm at. So we get like, it gets really cold here too. But Chicago for like us is like it's kind of like like New York City and like Los Angeles are like or not Los Angeles, New York City and Chicago are like the Los Angeles of like the East Coast. They're very much, but they're very way different than but like, so do you live around Phoenix? Are
Yeah,
you
I actually live in Tempe. I live
uh,
less than a mile away from the ASU campus.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, but are you strictly an ASU, like online student though?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, I go to the university and use all the perks,
Okay. Gotcha.
but
That's good.
and I have like a student ID card that I use all the perks that are associated with that too.
Right.
And like on my street alone, there's 6 professors live here.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, it's all it's
Mhm.
ASU all the way.
Right. Alrighty. So number one, sorry. I actually, like I said, I was like really upset because the other night when it hit me when I was like, I was sitting there, I think Friday is when I sent that message and it hit me and I was like, I started thinking about our meeting. I was like, okay. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's Friday. We have our meeting something. And then I just like, I don't know how I skipped that. Cause like I told you, I was like looking forward to that. And then I was like, and then just completely missed it. I don't know what happened really, but
Don't even worry because, well, and we were talking about how we do need to like come up with a backup plan, especially like we were talking about Thanksgiving, and you are probably going to be super busy during that time because Starbucks hours are insane.
yeah. And I work actually, I think I closed that night. But I think we close earlier than typical hours on that night. I think. It might not be though, but yeah, it is. It's crazy, and that is on Thursday. You're right.
So we
Right.
can manipulate the schedule, and please feel free to say, this is what would work for me. Just send it via email, and that way,
Okay.
because Danielle and I are going to be able to
Hmm.
accommodate you a little bit more easily, I think, especially because she and I are on the same time.
Right. And actually, speaking of time, I totally forgot too in my other course because we do a lot of these Zoom meetings, and we had planned a meeting yesterday, and so they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll do it 4 p.m. Arizona time." So I'm sitting here, I'm like, "Oh okay, 4 p.m. Arizona time." There's a 3 hour difference between us. It'll be 7 p.m. And then they asked me like, "Are you coming?" And I was like, like we have a little group me text message thing, and I was like, "Are you coming?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's like in 30 minutes, right?" And they're like, "No, it's going right now." And then I was like, I forgot that isn't Arizona like the only state that doesn't do daylight savings at this point?
That's right.
Yep. So, and I didn't even think about it. So now there's only a 2 hour difference so it'll be only a 2 hour difference between me, you, and Daniela now.
Yes.
When we schedule things.
I
Um,
it's so weird, isn't it? That
right.
there's no daylight savings here?
Yeah, but a lot of people think daylight savings is the most stupid thing ever too, though. So I don't know.
Because it kind of is.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's true. I'm just so used to it because the East Coast has been doing it for so long that
Oh yeah.
yeah. Okay. So basically, what you guys obviously went over then it was the visionary questions, right? That's basically
Yes.
okay.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. And I'll tell you where I feel like we had the bulk of really interesting conversation
mhm.
is around the question of what you would like your obituary to read.
I didn't even see it when I was looking through those prompts. Yeah, that is really interesting. Is that the last question they ask on the prompt?
I think it's hang on a second, I'm looking at my notes. It's number 5.
If it
If
helps
it
you.
helps, reframe
Uh,
question number 4 this way.
yeah, what do you want written in your obituary? Wow.
And I have to tell you that I was telling Daniela that I also am an Austrian citizen. And so in Austria,
Uh-huh.
the way that obituaries, even your tombstone,
Uh-huh.
your stone, whatever you want to call it, it will list your profession on it.
Really?
Because what you have accomplished is sort of your feather in your cap.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was saying that for her, it's so interesting because that seems like such a, an sort of bragging and boasting way to be remembered. Like she wants to be remembered in more of her personal traits.
Mm-hmm.
And I challenged her with, I think that most Americans especially think that way. But the truth of the matter is, you don't spend your whole life trying to be a good person. You
Right.
spend your whole life making career accomplishment.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. That's a huge, huge part of your life. So yeah, it makes sense that. And by the way, very interesting that so you have a dual citizenship then.
I do.
So that would have to mean that were you born in Austria?
No.
Okay. So how did that work? Now I'm very interested.
Yes, I'm sure you are. The Austrian government gave me citizenship as if I was born there as part of reparations for my grandparents and my great-grandparents fleeing from the Holocaust.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you are of very much Austrian descent then.
Correct.
So, I mean, directly. I mean, it's like your grandparents, you said. So
yes,
literally 2 generations.
My dad was the first generation born here, and then there's me.
Wow. That's really neat, actually.
Myself and my children have Austrian birth certificates, Austrian passport, or citizenship and passports. Yes, obviously, but yeah.
Well, I said it's neat that you're that you have. That's not neat that the way you had to go about getting it was
understood.
Not obviously, ideal. I'm sure your grandparents would have preferred it
some other way. Yes,
right,
indeed.
Exactly.
Indeed.
It's really wild. And your grandparents then were they born around World War I then? Would they have been around that time?
So let's see. My grandfather was born in 1918. And my grandmother in 22.
I think 18 might have been just post World War I. I think
it might have been just right after.
Because it was Austria. The whole thing with Franz Ferdinand was the whole thing that started the whole World War I, because it was the assassination, and he was Austrian, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the whole. So that's really interesting. So a lot going on in Austria between World War I and World War II.
Oh, a tremendous amount. And my family were very much a part of, because we're from Vienna. So they were very much a part of the arts and music scene. Mm-hmm. And, the way that Austrians put it, or the Viennese put it, is they were noble people. Mm-hmm. So they had means, which is how they were able to sort of buy their way out of the situations that the Nazis were putting them in.
Right. That was very fortunate. That's a really cool story, though. I sorry to get off topic, but I heard you say that. I was like, okay, now I'm interested to know why you have
I like telling this story because I think that, personally, I use it as leverage to talk about the way that we need to take care of reparations in this country against the African American people and against the Native American people. And frankly, those Japanese descendants who were held in internment camps.
Right.
It is given me a sense of, I don't want to say patriotism, that's not the right word, but I have a sense of commitment now to the Austrian government and helping with political issues and giving money to the system because of feeling a sense of belonging.
Right. And to be fair, in one sense, like the fact that you are even a citizen, that probably creates that kind of, you do have an obligation almost to your, how they typically say for Americans, like if you're an American, you have an obligation to your country, typically that's, and they'll probably be the same way, you have that of an obligation. Now, are you married?
I am.
So is your husband a dual citizen then too? No, he does not have it.
No.
Okay, so you could pack the kids up and go to Austria, but then they would be like, well, what? That's funny.
I know.
But that is really interesting, neat. And like you said, the reparations, and you're right, Native and what the U.S. at this point has done is actually really kind of sad, because I was out. I do a lot of backpacking, a lot of hiking, and so I was out in Washington State
Yeah, which
we
is
went
where
to,
I lived before here, actually.
is where you lived at, you said?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. So we went to Olympic National Park out there, and we did and we actually went outside. We went all the way to the coast, and outside of actually went into the national park, outside the national park, and then we basically hiked down the Pacific coast right along the beach for like 45 miles or something like that over a span of like 5 days. It was beautiful. It was awesome, and just slept right there on the beach at night. Just pitched your tents on the beach, had fires. It was great. But to get there, to cross over to where we were going, it was actually Native American land.
Right.
So when we got there, we had to, you were supposed to, pay your part of being on their land. And so there they had a whole, like, there's a few towns surrounding where we were at, these Native American towns. And it was really, and we also went up to, what is it? La Push. Have you heard of La Push, which is up in, yeah, that's where the other Native American reservation, and also completely famous now because of Twilight, right? But we went there, and because that's right about the area we're at, where we're hiking at, and that whole town being Native American too, and it was really just kind of sad though, because like, sure, we, as a country, we've given these, we've claimed we've given them these reparations, but they're, if you actually look
theirs to begin with.
Yeah, and then but if you actually look at the way they're living, it's like it's, you can tell how poor the areas are. Like,
Well,
it's just,
and when you're from the Northwest, we call that the res. And
okay, yeah,
it is, I mean, definitely building the casinos has helped somewhat, but no, I mean, that was basically, I mean, I remember I had a friend who went and taught English on the reservation. And, he was shot in the neck with an arrow.
Wow.
Because they were like, what are you doing here? We don't want your people here. And I remember I was totally protesting it at the time. I just graduated high school, and I was protesting it because I'm like, how dare you push this English bullshit on these people? Right. They don't want it. Like, don't do that to them.
Right.
That's your language. They don't want it. And it is strange to grow up with it culturally. And I don't know if that's because I'm a descendant of a Holocaust survivor, but culturally speaking, especially in the Northwest, it is still very prevalent, the segregation and oppression of the Native American people. I'm sure people in Oklahoma probably see that too. And, the Dakotas, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so you were actually born up in the Pacific Northwest.
I was born in the Bay Area of California.
Okay.
And moved up to the Pacific Northwest when I was a tween.
Okay, gotcha. Did you like it up there overall, though?
No.
No, you did not. Well, see, because I was really, and obviously working at Starbucks, I wasn't really that excited to go to, like, because we were in Seattle too. I wasn't really that excited because of Starbucks, but I always thought Seattle would be like a city I'd like, because some people call it like the outdoor city. It's kind of like very like, but got there and it just, I don't know, it almost wasn't exactly what I was like hoping it to be either. And it's just, and obviously I know in California, the homeless population they deal with there, I don't know, is that so much an issue in Arizona? Has that become
it's growing because, Arizona, specifically Phoenix, is the 5th largest city in the country now.
Oh, wow.
Population wise.
Yeah.
And so with that, of course, the homeless population, because of what's going on with the housing market, is very challenging. I mean, even the neighborhood that I live in, like I can't afford to move in my own neighborhood right now.
Right.
So it's growing because of those significant disparities, those those,
And that's, I think, what I collected when I got even to Seattle's like, Seattle's on par with like places like San Francisco now and such, and LA, and not that saying that makes a city bad, but it's kind of almost, it's discouraging and sad to see that happening. But
well, and I think, again, what's interesting about that is, and it's sort of tying it into this concept of vision, is that I think that those places have set themselves up to be these hubs where they're socially forward looking and progressive and all of these elements that we sort of tout as human beings that we're attracted to or interested in or want to uphold.
Mm-hmm.
But those are sort of missions of privileged people in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, on the hierarchy, on Maslow's hierarchy, people can't want something better for themselves if they don't even have shelter.
Right. Exactly. And I think, and that's found with, if you, I think I look in California, and a lot of times, like even like around LA and the homelessness issues there, and some of the people who speak out, like, you know, saying like this is so terrible about all, like, you know, such the high levels of like homeless population, are some of the, a lot of times are some of the richest people in Hollywood, are the people talking about it. And they're not, like you said, they're very well and they're privileged, and they will sit there all day and speak out about how bad it is, but a lot of times doesn't seem like doing much to actually fix it either.
Which is the problem with visions, right? Like,
Yeah.
people can constantly talk about, I want something for the future, or please follow me. But again, it goes back to that golden rule of you've got to walk the walk, talk the talk. And I actually lived right outside of Portland, Oregon, but I spent a lot of time in Seattle too. And Portland is definitely one of those places where I grew up knowing that, I mean, I protested for the spotted owl. I volunteered at soup kitchens. I did all of those things. And I look at the homeless population there, and it has gone leaps and bounds past what it was when I was younger. And I look at that and think, it's because the politicians and the people who are managing the business of the people don't have a vision of really creating equity. And it's funny because Daniela and I have the same conversation. This is all about, there cannot just be this sentiment of, we want equality for people. I want you to have the same things I want. But the thing is that the person next to me might need 10 more items than I need in order for us to both have access to the opportunity. This fundamental component of equity is got to be the foundation of a vision. I want this for our people, or I want this for my group. Okay, when I look out over the spans of my group, who needs what in order for us to get there? Right. This person needs 10 things. This person needs only 2. That person doesn't even need any. That one could give some away. There's got to be a vision that creates this concept of feeling a sense of togetherness, and that it's not about me having to just give whatever I have, or me being the only one contributing. It's about me wanting the same thing that the leaders want, or that the people that don't have any want. I mean, the homeless population and the problems that are going on with homelessness. I have been very vocal about it because it's growing here in Tempe, and I'm very much about, I don't want this to happen, not because I don't want to talk about the drugs or the garbage or I don't care about that. You know what I care about? There's human beings with like children and human beings in my neighborhood that don't have a home. Like, that's what I want to be the problem. I want it to be that there's this sense in us that says that isn't okay.
Right.
Not, I don't want to have to give up my clean streets and, you know, the drug use and that shit won't matter if we dial it back and say, the problem here is that I don't want the earth to die. I don't want women to not be able to do what they want with their own body. I don't want those things. And even if I don't choose to do the same things that will be required in order to avoid that stuff, the vision has to be over the spans of the people who need what.
And and you can't, like you said, you can't generalize that vision. It can't be the same for every single person. It's like you said, this person means more than this person, vice versa. And yeah, um that's really well said. Um
So
let's
tell me
see.
your obituary.
Ooh, okay, that'd be interesting. Um this is funny because this wasn't something I ever really have thought about, and I'm sure you guys hadn't
What
either.
Daniela said, and I will
Yeah.
tell you, I don't know if you've lost a parent, but my mom passed away last year,
Hmm.
and I didn't think about it until then. I
Hmm.
think it's sort of a progression of life thought.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I definitely have. I've lost grandparents, but I haven't lost any parents yet. Hopefully that won't be for a little while still.
Yes.
They're nice and they're 60. They're fine. Maybe I have some
Yes.
years left. Hopefully, but um, and when I first read that, when you read an obituary, I was thinking of it as an epitaph, but that's obituary you write up in like in a paper or whatever. Yeah.
Same.
Because I've been asked that question before. What do you want like on your epitaph? But
Mhm.
okay. See, I don't know. I almost, as much as work is a big part. I think maybe my accomplishments through like career wise, if I had that bundled into my obituary, I would want it to be more in the sense of like how I helped others, I think, more than just like the fact that, oh, like, well, he reached CEO of this company and made this much money and, this and that. Like, I don't think, as much as, that is part of the job, that it is building a business and bettering yourself. That is all part of it. I think at the end of my life, like, I know those things don't so much, I don't want to say maybe matter as much, those kind of aspects. I think maybe it's the kind of impact you leave on people. Um, or as we always hear, kind of what people are really big on is legacy. And I think I would hope that maybe my obituary talks about more of like the people throughout my time, if it's going to relate to my career, the people that I've helped in some way or another,
Mhm.
better themselves. Maybe not so much my own personal accomplishments. I wouldn't care that much about that. Um, and to be honest, I kind of think a lot of people, reading that really wouldn't even care to read about someone's like, oh well, yeah, this guy, once again, like I said, was CFO and then CEO, and like that, like to me, like I wouldn't find that. I don't know. Even if I was reading someone's obituary, I wouldn't find that interesting. I'd be way more interested in like their legacy, their impact of what they did, or maybe even if they I don't know if they put a story or something in there about how you impacted somebody's life. That would be way more meaningful to me. So I don't know how exactly that would be written because it says, "What do you want written?"
Yeah.
But I think that would be more of. I'd have to. It would be more of. I want to know. Like, and I don't think you would know exactly word for word what you would want written in it. But I think it would be more in regards to that, more of the impact, not. And what was your thoughts on that?
Well, what first I'll read you mine because I did
Yeah.
read a little something, and I just simply said that I would like it to read that I was loving, kind, and giving person dedicated to giving people the opportunity to grow to their greatest potential.
Hmm. Okay.
And the reason that I found this such an interesting practice or
Mhm.
exercise is that if I look at those words, am I working towards that vision right now?
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
living my life towards that vision? If that's the vision I have of how I'm going to leave,
Mhm.
is that where I'm at?
Right. So kind of looking at it as like a wake up call, like, is this okay? This is what I want. Am I actually, yeah,
Because
do
like in Austria, your headstone's going to say Dr. Farley,
yeah.
and of course I'll be working my whole life to try to achieve that. So that
Mhm.
makes sense. That was the vision I had for myself.
Right. Right.
At the end, that's what I was going to be.
Hmm.
And I feel like in our culture, this is something that we have to get really serious about because if this is what we have for this vision of what we're going to be like at the end, what are we actually doing between here and then to
make it a reality, turn your
fulfill
vision.
this vision?
Yeah, and I think that's and it's kind of ties back to what we were saying is and what you're saying with like the whole issues in the Pacific Northwest and California and all these visions that people have these visions of how they're going to be forward thinking and progressive, but it just kind of a lot of times seems like all we ever hear is the words of their vision and not seeing it come to fruition.
And in fact, the opposite of their vision is happening.
Right.
Which I think is really fascinating too, because I think for us as leaders, this is something that we really have to focus and hone in on is how can a vision in its words be so absolutely crystal clear, yet still not come to pass, or in fact, have an opposite effect?
Mm-hmm. Right. That is super intriguing how it, well, and it kind of makes sense to me, why that would be like a reaction to that is, I think in our last, one of our last Zoom meetings, we were talking about social media, right? And we were talking about the whole idea of like, and I had mentioned that story about how when people were all up in arms about the Amazon being on fire and they were posting about it, but then no one was doing anything to back it. And then if anything, like you get almost, it's that whole kind of concept of, have you ever been driving and you've seen a car wreck on the side of the road, or you saw someone crash? And you're like, okay, I could just call 911 or someone else will stop or this person will stop. And it's almost like that's kind of what the culture like of how vision is now, is that so many people like they're like, oh, this is the right thing, but I'm going to let someone else do it. I know what it is, but I'm going to pass on. Someone else surely will do it. And it just kind of, it kind of feels like that makes sense though, that the opposite reaction of what happens with that vision is if nobody is actually stepping forward to do anything, then in fact the situation is not going to improve. It's just going to go the opposite way.
Which Dr. Martin Luther King is a perfect example of this, because his speech and his actions were aligned.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's what I think this is about, is that at the end of the day, your vision is only purposeful and powerful and attainable if you personally are there doing the work required.
Right. Yep. And we probably all see it in I see it in the workplace all the time. I see people who, you can get a long ways by being able to talk your way into things. I've learned that. And I'm actually myself, and I think you seem to be the same way, pretty proficient in speaking. Like I actually do enjoy getting up, and I like public speaking.
Yes.
I enjoy it quite a bit. Are you the same way?
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoy public speaking. Some people think I'm crazy for it. They're like, because I think there's more people who dislike than like, and maybe that's a leadership quality, by the way. Maybe that's what we're going to find. A lot of people who we run into in these courses are similar. But right. But I've learned that, and so I'm like, I feel like when it comes to interviewing, I feel very confident when I go into interviews. I can usually like really convincingly run my way through an interview. But I know some people who are the same way, who have all these great words, but then and sometimes those words elevate them to that position. And then once they're in that position, you see, wow, these actions are not following what that was, which is like so crucial. Like your words at that point. And I think it's really good that you can't really, because people will see through it eventually. And you can't really hide behind your words forever. You have to put it into action. And like you said with Martin Luther King, that he definitely was a great example of aligning that. And it's so those have to be in a line to have your vision. Your vision has to. You can only say and not to keep rambling on, but remember how we were talking, me and Daniela, grew up in the generation where we've been told over and over, okay, just dream and you can, and you can be what you want to be, which is a great message. But it's for a lot of us, it's gotten to the point where it's like, it's gotten to the point where it's like, there hasn't been any like action put behind that, and maybe that's part
of false message.
Yeah,
you have this is the equity conversation,
right?
It's a false message. If you're living on the streets, you cannot be anything you want to be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're not being a realist in that sense, and which is important. But it's to the point where it's like okay, you were saying we've been told to dream big our whole life, and you can do whatever you want, and so now we really do have to dream big if like we want to retire by the time we're 60 years old. We really do have to dream big and hope we become like internet celebrities or something. like and obviously that's a little pessimistic view. You can still find your way, but it is really sobering. I actually had a friend who recently he was kind of interested, and he talked with a financial advisor about, he's like, what would it take for me to retire by like 65 right now and be able to retire from 65 and live, I don't know what, all the stipulations he gave, but he just said live pretty comfortably from 65 on. And his financial advisor said, you're probably going to want to have at least like $3.5 million saved up, like set aside, which is just like, I mean, and if you're accounting for inflation, $3.5 million by that time. And that's a lot of money. Like you have to, if you're not starting that, if you haven't already started working into that, and so it's the whole idea of like, yeah, like the dream big, but now we have to like really do have to dream big so we can.
I think there's a difference though between dreaming big and being practical. And what I mean by that is that $3 million, I mean, I don't know what it is that somebody thinks that they want.
Right.
But I think that the idea is that our wants and desires have been skewed.
Whereas we don't, 3 million is probably more than we maybe need.
Well, or the truth of the matter is that, maybe if he's not taking care of his body, then he's going to need more because of medical. And so could he reverse that need by just walking every day?
Right.
Or does everybody really need to live in a 3,000 square foot house? I don't think that's necessary. No.
No. I mean, absolutely.
There's many components to this that I think get jumbled in this needs wants equation. And if we again try to dial it back to, okay, looking out over the people, what is really required in order to have a vision of something that can check the boxes of care and happiness. And I think our checklists have become scrambled.
Yeah.
What is required in order to make these things happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like I said, I didn't know, like maybe that $3.5 million was he drives a $60,000-$70,000 car, for the rest of his life. Like, what are those numbers entailing, and
totally.
And, yeah. It's
you should fast forward to like the middle of our video. Daniela and I's video, and do like, maybe around 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And watch sort of that middle to end segment.
Okay.
I think you'll find it interesting.
A lot of good stuff in there. Yes, like I was saying, I was really bummed when I forgot that I missed it. No, and it's not your fault. It's absolutely not your guys' fault at all. I didn't even. And then I saw your guys' things, and because like we even talked about the week before, we're like, wow, we really enjoy these conversations. And then I was
totally.
Like, and one other thing, and we can probably wrap this up soon.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say I have to get going.
Absolutely.
But please go ahead.
I was going to say, just a side note, by the way, I wanted to mention to you guys, does the SYWD or whatever it's called, the tests, the little open book tests we have, do those drive you guys nuts? Because those tests drive me nuts just for the fact of the matter of like whenever the questions are literally you're sitting here and you're like trying to match word for word which statement is which, like,
Yes.
and I don't fully like I understand the point of it. I understand the creating probably the like the getting you to think about it again and reread that sentence and in your mind. But half the time I find myself when I'm doing it, I'm like just trying to like read like, okay, I'm going to read 5 words to just match up this entire phrase. And I think
it's an interesting, I suspect, I personally comprehend in that kind of a way where I'm just like hanging on to each of the words, trying to synthesize everything.
right.
And I suspect our professor is like that.
Uh-huh.
And so much more of our coursework is about abstract thinking. So
Right.
this is totally different, obviously, right?
Switching to do that. Yeah. I just found it really interesting because I haven't had a course yet in regards to like the testing where it was like that.
Oh,
Where
I can't imagine how much work he puts into this.
well, yeah, right, exactly.
But I will say that for this Captain Cook exercise, it was really helpful for me to have this every single word thing because I do not find that story interesting at all.
Yeah.
It's so boring to me.
Right. I kind of like I said, I like traveling. I like backpacking outdoors. So there's the whole idea of like the exploration aspect that I think is kind of intriguing. But
It's so hard for me though because I'm just like, what a bunch of bastards!
Right? Yeah.
Like, how dare they go onto these islands and act like they know anything about anything?
Right, and spreading disease all over the island.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, yeah. It was interesting. Yeah, that part I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's. And what year was this in that this was happening? This had to have been. This was like post Christopher Columbus, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I should have known what it was. Like I did all the most of the reading that entailed. Obviously, I don't think we read the whole book. I think is huge, by the way.
Oh my gosh, it's so huge, and I have to tell you, like, there's this YouTube channel that I am totally addicted to that does these creative ways of talking about history, and I watch it with my boys all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was immediately like, Captain Cook, I need something to give me visual to put to this story because I'm like, this is too much.
Right. And I found actually really interesting the thing where reading up on where now because the author was talking about how he never realized that Captain Kirk from Star Trek's his character was inspired by Captain Cook. Did you pick up on that? They was talking about that.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought that was super. I mean, obviously, I didn't grow up in a generation where Star Trek was much of a thing, but I've definitely seen some of them. But I thought that was interesting. I was like, that's where the inspiration came for the.
Well, and it's funny because my entire PowerPoint presentation, I mean, I've started this from the beginning, is all classic Star Trek.
Oh, is it? Are you like a Star Trek fan?
No.
Oh, okay.
I watched all the episodes because it's what my parents and my grandparents did.
Gotcha.
You know, like I know them all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't volunteer to go watch that rubbish again.
You're right.
But again, for me, it's such a. I can't wait for you to see my PowerPoint presentation. You'll probably laugh because it's so much about just pointing out these simple, ridiculous memes that share these stories of just stuff we're supposed to be like, duh,
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm excited to see those.
Yes, it'll be hilarious. But and the professor, of course, is enjoying it because he's just like, this is hilarious. But
right.
I'm having so much more fun making up the memes myself. I go and pull these classic pictures and then have these, stupid Star Trek a-holes that are landing on planets they don't belong, saying things, No,
you're more creative than me on that. Man, yeah, I'm just not good at the memes. And I'm part of the generation that's all about them.
You know, I've had a lot of experience talking in my head about judging people in this way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this is again that point of privilege. I mean, I'm not going to harp on this, but
Mhm.
you are a man and you are a Caucasian man, and the things that are said to you are different than the things that are said to me.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Anyways,
Well, it
okay.
was good, and I'm so very thankful that you hopped on here and talked
Of
to me. That's
course,
awesome.
it was
I
my
appreciate it.
pleasure. I appreciate this conversation so much. I enjoy these conversations immensely. I have no words.
Right.
So next week you're good though.
Yes, I am good for next week.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
good. Good.
All
And
right.
then next week we'll talk about Thanksgiving.
Right. Okay. Yep.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Take
All
it
right. Thanks,
easy.
Don. See ya.
Bye.